How I tried to use NotebookLM to flip my class. That's today's topic on the Reach Every Student podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Jon Bergmann, and in the past few weeks, I've been playing around with a lot of AI things, but one, of course, NotebookLM. A lot of you have been playing around with this. And I was dialoguing with a colleague, and the idea came up as we were chatting is how could we flip our class with NotebookLM? You see, one of the problem I was trying to solve was that if a student is, say, watching, consuming content in what in the flipped learning world we call the independent space, the homework space, if you will, is if a student's watching a video or reading some text or whatever it might be, or listening to a podcast, they don't have the opportunity to interact and ask questions. And so I spent some time dialoguing, if you will, if that's the right word, with Gemini and say, what would be the best format? Because maybe you don't know this, but in NotebookLM, they have a new feature called the interactive feature. And so here's what I did. Number one, I uploaded my content to NotebookLM. So I uploaded a couple of videos that my students would have normally watched. I also uploaded the contents of the textbook that our students use to NotebookLM. And then I had it make an audio podcast. You could also make a video. I had to make a video too. And then what I decided to do is I wanted to then assign my students to interact with this, because then I wanted to require that they would, click this interactive button. They can interrupt the podcast hosts, the AI hosts, and ask them questions. And so I said, I think this could work. I dialogued back and forth. I wondered, is there a way I could share? If there's a way I could track how they did it. And between Gemini and this, half-hour conversation with Gemini, the system that they came up with, or we came up with, AI is not a real person. So the system that seemed to work in the context is then I shared the Google LM with my students. This is the plan, at least. And then I was going to have my students listen to the podcast, interrupt it, but I wanted some record of that. And because then what they could do, and then I found a particular prompt, and then Gemini helped me with this prompt, and then they would put this in the NotebookLM and it would summarize the conversation that they'd had. So it sounded like a good plan. And I said, well, let me first do it myself. And so I sat down and I took notes on the Google LM podcast. And I interrupted it frequently and asked questions, and I really had a very satisfying experience. One thing I noticed is that when I was doing it, I didn't have like a concerted time. So this audio file was, let's say, 15 minutes long. I think that's about what it is. So it was about 15 minutes, but I didn't have a full 15 minutes devoted. I'm a teacher, right? So things get interrupted. And so I would just pause it and I would come back later, but this is one of my beefs, is it didn't remember where I'd stopped. But I just interrupted and said, hey, can you start at this point? It had to do with like rock slides and landslides. Can you start where we transition from a rock slide to a slump? I've already listened to this part of this audio podcast. And they would pick right back up. And I had a very satisfying experience of interacting and learning with the NotebookLM. So I said, all right, I'm ready to do this, all right? So I set this all up. I explained to my students how they were going to do this. And it was a fail. I shared the NotebookLM with all the students. By the way, this was a pain. I had to actually share it with each of the students. I couldn't just share a link to it because I created the notebook. One of the things in the dialogue back and forth with Gemini was, if you're in NotebookLM, the person who owns the content is the person who has access to the data. So if a student uses my notebook, I don't get their data, because it sounds like a good idea from a FERPA thing or whatever. I want we want to protect student data. So, anyways, the students had a lot of problems. They kept having to restart it, and sometimes it would randomly restart on them, and they did not like the fact they had to keep interrupting. And then for some reason, and it may be because of how I set things up. If you're listening and you figured this out, talk to me. It seemed to not remember, this is the reporting of my students, and they really did try, that when they would like copy this prompt, which said, summarize all of the questions and produce a report, et cetera, et cetera. And so the idea is they were going to do this prompt, and I had given them the prompt. Then they would copy and paste that into a Google form and then I would have access to those, and I could then use AI to summarize the AI's summaries of each of the kids. That was the plan, but it just didn't work. And so as I think forward, what could NotebookLM do? So Google, if you're listening to this, you need some improvements. Is there a way to create another system where instead of, if I create a notebook, could I not just share it, but like assign it to students? Could it be incorporated into sort of the same way that you have Google Classroom? Now, I don't use Google Classroom. I use our learning management system, D2L Brightspace. It doesn't matter. Find a way that it's shareable, but then somehow trackable to what students do. And I could assign portions of it. I also had it create the video, and the students had options to the video, and they could do all this stuff. Because see, I've uploaded these contents for them to have access to. Now, I know the students can do that, but that feels like more of a heavy list. There's a very specific, narrow thing. There's one lesson, and I've done it once. And so that would be my recommendation. And I think another thing I would love to see is that if you're in interactive mode and a student listens to the video or the podcast, the audio file, then what I would like is it to know that they listened to the first 10 minutes, interacted with it, and they just, hey, maybe the prompt could be, hey, do you want to pick up where you left off? And I think that could not be that difficult for them to do. And like I said, the thing I'm trying to do is build an interactivity in the independent space. And so I wonder if there is some other way that this could be done. Maybe Google LM is not the answer to do this. So recently on one of my X accounts, I posted about how I was going to be flipping with NotebookLM, or at least making an attempt. And one of my followers, Hanai Fidel, he has said that there's this new tool out there. It's called Skylo, skylo.ai, SKYLOW.ai. And this is the idea. I think they're trying to solve this problem. So maybe the problem that I am trying to solve, where they have like interactive video. So I need to go play with this. This is my next tool to try out. I think there's a lot of power. This is a niche that could be really filled as a way for students to interact with video content with an AI kind of in the background. So anyways, I'm trying to solve this problem. I'm really loving some of the features of NotebookLM. I am going to be using it in NotebookLM even this week. So our students, we are approaching finals week. We have 2 weeks before finals. We have one more week, I guess, and then finals week. And I have created a review guide so they have access to all the resources, and I'm going to have them create their NotebookLMs to prepare for their final exams. And I think that's going to be very useful for the students. And that's really the plan for notebooks. So maybe I'm using, I'm putting a square peg in a round hole. And again, I was in a group last night talking with some colleagues about AI. And as we were having a conversation, one thing that one of the guys really said and made a lot of sense, he's devoting about like a half an hour a day to just reading about AI or playing with an AI tool. I am convinced that AI is going to be where we're at in the future. There are lots of problems with it. There are lots of issues that we're facing with AI. I think ethically, in so many ways, there's the real chance that it could cause stupefaction and loss of critical thinking skills unless we really think this through carefully. We do not want to do what we've done to our students with social media and just let it open willy-nilly. That was a disaster for students and mental health and all the kinds of things that brought. And that can happen, and honestly, it will happen with AI, things for many students. But those of us who, care about our kids, we want to find good ways to use AI because they're going to get into the job market someday, and they're not going to be just having to work independently with just their brain. They will have a co-pilot with them, AI, to help them think and whatnot. So it's important that we teach them how to use it in a way that's good, not just from a, academic integrity perspective, but from in the perspective of how to help kids navigate this new world. And this is, as I've written in other places, this is the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to rethink about what that's going to look like, and that's going to change the world in ways we can't even conceive at this point, whether you like it or not. So it's so important that we teach them how to use it in ways that are going to help them thrive and become better humans more than anything else. I mean, that's my heart, is how do we teach them to use that? And yeah, so I diverted from the main topic about Notebook LM, but that's kind of the point, is I want to teach the students good uses of AI so that will help them rethink, just get used to using the tools in ways that are productive and not destructive to their brains. So anyways, maybe the title of this podcast should be, I tried to flip my class with Notebook LM and it was a fail, which it was. I may go back and try to do it again and tweak the settings, but at this stage, I'm a little bit not great hopeful, at least in this instance. And so my next little half-hour stint, I think, is this SkyFlow thing. I want to try it out and see if that solves the problem I'm trying to solve, right? Getting students to have ways to interact with a flipped video when the teacher's not present. So that's always been one of the weaknesses of the flipped classroom, is that when a student is stuck and they're watching a video at home or whatever, they can't ask a question. But AI should be able to solve this. Maybe this new tool is the bee's knees. We'll see. Hey, thanks for listening to this podcast. If you like it, share it with a friend. Click the subscribe button. You know the deal. Have a great, great day. Hey, Jon Bergmann out.